Please, just listen to my story, because if you're an older woman like me, who once welcomed her son's wife like a daughter, only to be treated like dirt, tied to chairs, kicked in silence, and dragged like garbage, then you need to know you're not alone. She nearly broke me, but I live to tell you how I made her pay. They say growing old is a gift. I used to believe that. I used to knit blankets for my grandchildren and prepare tea for the woman who called me Ma. But now I sit tied to a chair by the window, my hands swollen, my dignity hanging by a thread, and wonder what kind of gift comes wrapped in bruises and silence. She says it's for my safety. You're too forgetful now, Ma, she mutters sweetly while tightening the rope around my wrists. You'll fall and hurt yourself again. But it's a lie. She doesn't want me to move, not for my safety, but for her convenience. My legs ache. I've been in the same position for hours. She never leaves the fan on. The sweat collects beneath me. I can't rub my feet, can't adjust my aching back. I've begged before, just for a pillow under my spine, but she smiled and walked away, humming, "Old women are always so demanding." When my husband died, my son brought her home like a savior. "She'll take care of you, Ma," he said. "You won't be alone anymore." And I believed him. I cooked for her. I gave her my bangles. I even slept on the floor when she said her back hurt on the guest bed. But kindness rotted into cruelty. The first time she hurt me, it was with her voice. Cutting, cold, sarcastic. Then came the hands, pinching the inside of my arm as she passed me by in the hallway. "Don't act so helpless," she'd sneer. "You're not a queen here." The twisting of skin, always in places hidden by my sweater. Not enough to leave obvious bruises, but enough to make me cry in the bathroom when no one looked. Then she began dragging me by the wrist, or worse, by my thinning hair. "Move faster, Ma," she'd hiss while yanking me from the kitchen to the bedroom. My knees buckled once, and she let me fall. On purpose. I heard her gasp and shout, "Oh." She slipped again. My son came rushing, but I saw it in his eyes he didn't want to deal with it. So he believed her. Or pretended to. Last week, she kicked me. Right in the ribs, as I bent to pick up a spoon I had dropped. No one was home. I couldn't even scream. The pain was sharp and deep, like something had cracked inside. But I told the doctor it was the mattress again. A lie I've told too many times. Today, she tied me to the chair for wandering again. But all I'd done was step into the hallway to look at the sunlight. I used to love watching birds from this window. Now I watch shadows. Hers. Mine. Waiting for the next footstep. Wondering if it'll be her hand or her heel. But tonight, something feels different. As my arms swell against the tight binding, and my back throbs against the hard wood, a quiet voice rises in me. A voice I thought had died with my husband. A voice that says, "You raised her like your own. And now she treats you like nothing." But this story is far from over. When my son married her, I gave her my wedding bangles. Real gold, passed down from my own mother. I told her, these are not just ornaments. They carry prayers, sacrifices, and love. She smiled, touched my feet, and whispered, "Thank you, Ma. I'll protect them with my life." I never thought she'd use the same hands that wore those bangles to hurt me. This morning, she untied me from the chair and dropped my breakfast plate onto my lap like I was some animal. Dry toast, a half-boiled egg, and not a drop of water. I looked up at her, her perfectly painted face, her lips twisted in a smirk. "Eat fast, Ma. You've got laundry to fold." Or did your bones forget how to be useful too? I tried to lift the toast, but my fingers were numb from being bound all night. The tremble in my hand made her laugh. Not loudly, just enough to humiliate. She walked out of the room, and I took the first bite. The egg was cold, hard, bitter, just like this house. Later, as I hobbled to the bathroom with aching knees, I saw something in the mirror, a fingerprint on my neck. Faint, purplish, from when she had grabbed me last night. I touched it and tears filled my eyes, not because of the pain, but because I didn't even notice it happen. She's become good at it. Pinching, twisting, jabbing me in ways that don't scream abuse to outsiders. A pinch under my arm while pretending to help me sit. A twist of skin on my thigh as she adjusts my blanket. A shove disguised as guiding me down the hallway. And if I stumble or wince, "Oh, poor Ma," she says, just loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She's so fragile these days. But I'm not fragile. I'm buried. And buried things don't disappear forever. Sometimes they rise. Tonight, she forced me into the storeroom. Said she needed space in the living room for her friends coming over for a card party. The storeroom is full of dust, old trunks, broken memories. She made me sit on the cold floor, back against the wall. No light, no blanket, no water. I asked softly, "Can I use the bathroom first?" She leaned close and said, "Maybe you should learn to hold it, Ma, like a child." She slammed the door. I heard the key turn, and in that darkness, something inside me cracked. Not like bones. No, something older broke. Something deeper. My silence. My patience. My hope that she'd change. It died right there in that storeroom. I sat for hours, not crying, just thinking. I thought of the bruises under my bangles. The cracked rib I still couldn't sleep on. The night she tied me to the chair and went out partying while I sat, frozen, unable to call for help. And then I thought of the old kitchen knife, hidden behind the broken spice box in the bottom drawer. I had tucked it there during the first week she moved in. I don't know why. Maybe even back then, my soul knew I'd need it someday. I may be old. I may be slow. But I still remember pain. And I remember how to survive. She locked the door tonight. But tomorrow, the door opens. And so will I. The lock clicked open at dawn. I didn't move. I just sat there on the cold floor, my eyes wide in the dim gray light, as she stood over me, one hand on her hip, the other holding her phone like it was more precious than human breath. "Oh, still alive?" she laughed. "Good. Get up, Ma. I need the storeroom cleaned. Guests spilled wine last night, and I can't have you sitting here like a stray dog." I didn't answer. Not because I was scared, but because my silence had become my shield. Words give them power. Silence makes them wonder. She stepped aside as I slowly rose, my joints crackling like dry twigs. My legs were stiff, but I didn't show it. I just walked, slow, hunched, deliberate. I went straight to the kitchen, and as she turned her back to scroll through her phone, I reached behind the old spice drawer. There it was, the rusted knife with a wooden handle. Not sharp anymore, but solid, familiar, comforting. I didn't take it then. Not yet. I simply touched it, ran my fingers along the dull edge. It felt like touching part of myself, a version of me I thought had died long ago. She never noticed. She never does. Later that day, while folding bedsheets in the guest room, she pinched the inside of my arm again. Hard. The kind of pinch that doesn't scream, but it burns for hours. "Faster, Ma. Stop shaking so much," she snapped, like I was a machine that had failed warranty. Then she did something new. She dropped a corner of the heavy bed frame on my foot. Not enough to break the bone, just enough to make it swell, purple, useless. When I gasped, she smirked. "Oops. Clumsy old woman. You should have moved faster." And then she left me there. As I sat on the floor, nursing my foot with a dish towel, I stared at the wedding photo still hanging above the bed. My son, grinning in his tuxedo. Her, radiant in red, eyes full of future. And me, off to the side, smiling. Clueless. That was the last time she ever touched me with kindness. But something happened as I sat there in that room, surrounded by the smell of lavender and lies. I made a silent oath. Not to hurt her. No. To make her feel what I felt. Every moment. Every humiliation. Every unspoken scream. And I knew just how to start. You see, in this house, she thinks I'm nothing but a fragile old woman. But I know her patterns. I know where she keeps the wine she hides from my son. I know the number she calls when he's out of town. I know what she does at night when she thinks I'm asleep, what she deletes from her phone every morning. And I know how to whisper the truth into the right ears, in the right way, at the right time. Because sometimes, the sharpest blade isn't in your hand. It's in your memory. The next morning, I made her tea. The way she likes it light, with almond milk and 2 drops of honey. I served it warm, not too hot, on the tray with the gold trim saucer she always insists on. I even placed a tiny napkin under the cup, just the way she orders me to. She didn't even look up from her phone. Put it on the table, she mumbled, scrolling through whatever she scrolls through. And don't talk to me today. I've got enough on my plate. I nodded and stepped back. Quiet. Invisible. But as she sipped her tea, I watched. She didn't notice anything different. Because there wasn't anything different. Not yet. The real poison wasn't in her cup. It was in what I whispered to her friend Anjali over the phone last night. Anjali, who gossips more than she breathes. The one who comes over once a week with imported chocolates and stories about other people's marriages. I called her from the landline after midnight, something I haven't touched in years. My voice was soft, creaky, innocent. I didn't mean to overhear anything, but you should talk to your husband, Anjali Beta. I saw something, a man, not our son, coming to the house when he's away. She gasped. Swore me to secrecy. Promised she wouldn't say a word. She lied. By noon today, for people in our neighborhood knew. By evening, I heard her scream. What the hell are you talking about, Nisha? Who told you that? She was yelling into the phone, pacing up and down the hallway, her heels hitting the floor like gunshots. She's senile. She's making things up. She probably thinks the gardener is my boyfriend. She didn't know I was standing behind the curtain listening, watching her unravel. And it felt good. Not because I want her to suffer, but because for once, she was the one being doubted. She was the one sweating. She was the one losing control. That evening, she pinched my arm again, harder than ever. No words, just pain. Like she was trying to squeeze the truth out of me. But I didn't flinch. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "You should be careful who you hurt, Beta. Some wounds don't bleed, but they rot." She went pale. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She walked away. And I smiled, because I knew what was next. My son is coming home this weekend, and before he arrives, I will unlock the second drawer in her dresser, the one where she keeps the letters from him. The man she says doesn't exist. Let her explain that. Let her try. I am not just surviving anymore. I am remembering. And soon, I will be revealing. The moment the doorbell rang, something in my bones shivered. Not from fear. From knowing. My son, Rohit, had finally come home. He entered the house with the same familiar scent, musk and warmth and city air. His hug was firm, but brief. He didn't notice the way I winced when he touched my shoulder, the one still bruised from being shoved into the bathroom door 3 nights ago. Or maybe he did notice, and chose not to see. "She's been doing great," my daughter-in-law said sweetly as she appeared behind him, wrapping her arms around his. "Even walking more. Isn't that right, Ma?" She looked at me, eyes sharp behind her mascara. Her voice had that edge, the silent threat layered in fake concern. I nodded. I played my part. The tired, grateful old woman. "Yes, Beta. She's been very helpful." His smile widened. "That's good to hear. I was worried leaving you both alone." Oh, if only he knew. He walked off to bring his luggage inside, and she turned to me, leaned close, and whispered under her breath, "You better not ruin this for me." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just smiled. Because what she didn't know was that while he unpacked his bags upstairs, I had already unpacked hers. Last night, after she fell asleep, I unlocked the second drawer in her dresser, the one she thought I'd never reach. The one with the perfume samples and lipstick smears and hidden envelope filled with letters signed, "Forever yours, Vic." I didn't read them all. I didn't have to. Just the one where she wrote, "He still believes I'm staying here to care for the old woman. If only he knew I pray for her to die in her sleep." I folded that letter neatly, tucked it between the pages of the photo album she'd gifted my son 2 Diwalis ago. The one he always looks through on his first night back. And I waited. Evening fell. Dinner was tense. She kept laughing too loudly, complimenting me with clenched teeth. He didn't say much. After we ate, I saw him sitting in the living room alone, flipping through the album. Then his hands froze. His eyes narrowed. He pulled the folded page from between the photographs. He read, and something shifted. He looked up at me slowly. I met his eyes. I didn't say a word. But for the first time in years, neither did he. The silence after he read the letter was louder than any scream I'd ever heard. He stared at the paper like it was burning in his hands, as if the words were too sharp to process. Then, softly, he called out her name, Ria. She was in the kitchen, wiping counters she'd already cleaned. She turned, all smiles, wiping her hands with a towel. "Yes, love. Can you come here?" There was a stiffness in his voice that even she noticed. Her smile flickered for just a second. But she recovered fast. She always does. When she stepped into the room and saw the envelope in his hand, her face changed. Not all at once, but like glass cracking beneath heat. 1,000 tiny fractures. "What's that?" she asked. "You tell me," he said. "You wrote it." She laughed. Lightly. Nervously. "Oh my God, Rohit, that's nothing. That was from years ago. Before we were even serious. You wrote it 2 months ago." She froze. I watched from the hallway, invisible. Like always. She tried to grab the paper from him. He pulled it back. "You said you were here to take care of my mother. That you loved her." "I do," she shouted. "You know how dramatic I can get sometimes. I was just venting. Every daughter-in-law does that." "You think I actually meant it?" He didn't answer. He looked at me. Not in anger. In confusion. That's when I realized my son wasn't ready to believe me. Not yet. The truth was in front of him, in ink and paper, but his heart was still tied to the woman who held his world together. She saw it too. So she turned the tide. She began to cry. Huge, practiced sobs. "You know what this is, Rohit? She's turning you against me. Ever since you left her here with me, she's been trying to break us apart." My chest tightened. She didn't just twist the truth. She strangled it. He stood between us now, eyes darting between the woman who gave him life and the woman he gave his life to. He shook his head. I just need time to think," he said, then stormed upstairs and shut the door. And, just like that, she turned to me. No words. Just a look. A look I'd never forget. A storm was coming. But what she didn't know is that I had already prepared for it. Because tonight, she would go too far. And tomorrow, I would finally go free. I knew something was wrong the moment the door clicked shut behind her. She had waited until my son left for his meeting, something urgent at the office, she said. The moment his car pulled away, her smile dropped like a mask falling off. "You just couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you?" she spat. I stayed silent. She stood between me and the living room door, arms folded, rage trembling in every muscle. "You think you're clever? Hiding letters?" Whispering poison to Anjali. Turning Rohit against me. Her voice grew louder, sharper. "You don't know how this game works, old woman. I could make one phone call and they'd put you in a care home tomorrow." I looked at her, not with fear, but with the quiet fire of someone who has been burned too long. And that's when she did it. She grabbed my wrist, dug her fingernails deep into the skin, then twisted my arm slowly like she was wringing out a cloth. My bones screamed. My knees buckled. She let me drop to the floor. "You want to pretend to be a victim?" she hissed. "Then I'll give you something to cry about." She dragged me, by my arms, into the storeroom again. My foot hit the edge of the door frame. I bit my tongue to keep from crying out. She shoved me inside, slammed the door, and this time, double-locked it. I sat on the cold floor, heart pounding, throat dry. My shoulder throbbed where it hit the wall. My ankle swelled where Shed kicked me before closing the door. But I didn't cry. I didn't panic. Because she made one mistake. She thought she had locked me away. She didn't realize. She had locked herself in a war. I had nothing left to lose, and everything to take back. I stayed in that storeroom all night. No food, no water, no blanket. Just the smell of dust, old paint cans, and my own aching skin. She didn't open the door, not even once. She thought she had one. That I'd beg. That I'd crumble like the bones she loved to bruise. But what she didn't know was that this room, this prison, used to be mine long before it became hers. I helped build this house with my husband. Every corner, every nail, every floorboard. And beneath the loose wooden panel in the far corner was something I had hidden nearly 20 years ago. With effort, I crawled, dragging my body across the floor inch by inch. My hands trembled. My hips screamed. But I didn't stop. I reached under the shelf, pulled at the old board, and there it was, a small metal box. Inside it, a spare key to the study where she kept her private things, my old flip phone, barely charged, but still working, a photograph of my son as a child, in my arms before she ever touched his life, and a small vial of cayenne chili powder. Dry but deadly sharp, the powder wasn't for her. It was to remind me of what she had once rubbed into my mouth when I cried out, of the sting, of the silence, and of the strength I would never forget again. I texted just one person from that phone, an old friend from my village who owed me more than a few favors. The message was short: come tomorrow. Bring the woman from the shelter. I'm ready. No name, no address. Just enough. By morning, my back was soaked in sweat. My lips were cracked. But when the door finally opened, I didn't flinch. She looked down at me and smirked. Still alive, I see. I looked up at her and smiled. Because I knew she had just unlocked the door to her own downfall. By mid-morning, I heard the knock. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. But it was precise, like someone who knew exactly which door to knock on and why. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, wrist sore, ankle wrapped with an old scarf. She had let me out of the storeroom hours ago, acting like nothing had happened. Breakfast is on the table, she'd said, brushing past me. Not even a glance. Not even a smirk this time. Because she knew my son would be back soon. And she needed everything to look perfect. But perfection doesn't hold when truth is bleeding through the cracks. I shuffled to the door and opened it. There stood Mira, a woman from the local women's shelter I once volunteered with long ago. Her eyes went wide the moment she saw my face, the shadowed eyes, the split lip, the limp I tried to hide. Behind her stood Padma Didi, my childhood friend from the village. Fierce, unshakable, and holding her phone in plain view, recording everything. Mira didn't say a word. She stepped inside calmly. My daughter-in-law came rushing down the stairs, all polished smiles and fake concern. Oh! Hello. Is there a problem? Mira raised her hand. Don't, she said, quiet but cold. Not today. My daughter-in-law looked at me, eyes wide, then narrowed. You called them, she hissed under her breath. You old snake, and before anyone could react, she slapped me. Hard. The kind that rings in your ear and rattles your teeth. For a moment, the room went dead silent. Even the ceiling fan stopped humming. Then Padma Didi stepped forward, voice shaking with fury. Try that again. Touch her one more time. And I swear to God, I will drag you to the same hell you've dragged her through. Mira moved between us, standing in front of me like a shield. She didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She simply looked my abuser in the eye and said, Get your things. You're leaving this house. Now. My daughter-in-law scoffed. And what, live in the street? Padma Didi smiled. No. You'll go back to wherever you came from. But not before every bruise, every scar, every secret is documented and delivered to your husband. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. Mira raised her phone. I already did. And that's when my daughter-in-law, so strong, so vicious, so loud, finally fell silent. Her hand trembled. Her face paled. And she stepped back. Because now she was the one afraid. And I was finally free. But forgiveness still had one more chapter. He came home earlier than expected. The car hadn't even stopped before he jumped out and ran toward the front door. His keys fumbled. His hands were shaking. He had already seen the video. Padma Didi made sure of it. The slap. My swollen ankle. The bruises that bloomed under the sleeves I used to pull down in shame. He had seen it all. The door burst open. He stood there, breathless, his eyes wild with disbelief. Ma, I stood in the hallway, a small bag in my hand. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just looked at him the way a mother does when her child has been missing, not physically, but emotionally for years. He stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on mine. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. I did, I said. In small ways. In hints. In silences. You just didn't want to hear it. He collapsed to his knees. Like a boy again. I thought you two were just clashing. I thought she was stressed. I thought, his voice broke. I thought you were exaggerating. I knelt beside him. My bones groaned, but my heart did not. It's easier to believe your mother is being difficult than to believe your wife is cruel, I said gently. I know. I was a wife once, too. I made excuses for a man who hurt me, just like you did for her. He sobbed into his hands. I'm so sorry, Ma. For the first time in years, he touched my hand not out of duty, but from something deeper. Regret, grief, love. And I held it. Because in that moment, I remembered the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knees. Who believed I could fix anything. And maybe, just maybe, I still could. But not with silence anymore. I'm leaving, I said. Not to punish you, but to heal. He looked up, eyes swollen. Where will you go? To a place where no one locks the door behind me. A place where I can sleep without wondering if someone will twist my arm in the dark. A place where I am not a burden, but a person. He nodded. And then, quietly, he said, Can I come see you? Even if I don't deserve to. I touched his cheek. You can try. But healing isn't just about visiting me. It's about facing what you allowed. Owning it. And never letting it happen again. I picked up my bag. Padma Didi was waiting outside. Mira stood beside the car, holding the door open. I took one last look at the house where I'd lived, cried, bled, and finally rose. And I walked out. Not broken. Not bitter. But braver than I had ever been. Because the next chapter would be mine. Not hers. Not his. Mine. The shelter was nothing like I expected. There were no harsh white walls or cold tile floors. No silence filled with shame. Instead, the first thing I heard was laughter. Faint, but real. And the smell of fresh tea. Mira led me inside gently, as if I might break. But I wasn't going to break. Not anymore. I passed a small sitting area where 3 older women sat knitting together. One of them had a brace on her hand. Another walked with a cane. They looked up when I entered, and in their eyes, I saw something terrifying and beautiful. Recognition. Not pity. Not curiosity. But a quiet nod, like they had been waiting for me. Later that evening, I was given a clean bed, a hot meal, and a moment I hadn't had in years. A locked door that kept people out, not in. I slept like the dead. When I woke, I didn't cry. I got up, bathed slowly, and walked to the common room. And there, sitting by the window, was an old woman with silver white hair and dark bruises fading along her jawline. She looked up at me and smiled. You're the one from the video, she said. The one who stood up. I sat down beside her. Not at first. She nodded. None of us do. At first, we bow our heads. Then, One day, we lift them. We didn't need to explain the pain, the shame, the years of hiding. We all already knew. There was another woman named Reka who hadn't spoken in 2 months. Her son had pushed her down the stairs and told the neighbors she tripped. Another, Shanti, had burned scars up her arms. She still slept with the lights on. And yet, every day, we laughed a little more. A shared cup of tea. A moment of silence without fear. A stitched sari sleeve passed from one trembling hand to another. We had all been hurt, but we weren't broken. We were healing together. And in their stories, I began to rewrite my own, not just as a victim, but as a voice. One that would not stay silent again. It started with Reka, the woman who hadn't spoken in 2 months. She sat in the corner every day, her sari always too big for her frame, her hands always trembling just slightly. She didn't look people in the eye. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But I saw her. I saw myself in her. One morning, I brought her tea without saying a word. I just sat beside her and waited. We watched the sparrows on the balcony rail together. After a while, she reached out and took the cup. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't have to. The next day, I brought her a small biscuit with the tea. Still, no words. But her fingers rested on my wrist for a second longer than necessary. By the third day, she whispered one sentence. He said I was worthless. I didn't say anything back. I just held her hand. Because I knew. Those words sink deep. They rot the inside. You start to believe them. But they're lies. Rotten lies meant to keep women like us quiet. I told her that on the 4th day. She didn't reply. But on the 5th day, she brought me tea. By the end of the week, Reka was speaking in full sentences. By the 2nd week, she sat with the other women and told her story. Shaking, crying, but telling it. And when she was done, she looked at me and said, "You taught me how to say it out loud." It wasn't just Reka. One by one, the other women came to me. Not because I was special, but because I had survived. Because I had lived through the burning silence and come out the other side with a scarred but beating heart. So I listened. I hugged. I wiped tears. I sat through long silences until they became trembling voices. And in doing so, something inside me finally settled. Not the pain, it never fully leaves, but a sense of purpose. A reason. One evening, Mira pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "the women here call you Alma of strength." I smiled. I was never strong. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. That's what all strong women say. And that night, as I lay in my small bed, the walls no longer closing in, the doors still safely locked, I whispered aloud, "I am not weak." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. It was raining when she arrived. Not the soft kind of rain that kisses the earth, but the harsh kind that beats the roof and makes everything feel colder than it should. I was helping Reka fold some donated shawls in the shelter's common room when Mira came to the doorway. "There's someone here," she said. Her tone was unreadable. "For you." I turned. And there she stood. My daughter-in-law. Hair soaked. Lip trembling. No makeup. No pride. Just fear. She didn't look like the woman who used to lock storerooms and twist the skin on my arms like I was dough. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. We stared at each other. For a long time. She finally whispered, "Please." I don't know where else to go. A few of the other women turned to look. I saw their eyes widen. And for a moment, I felt a familiar flame rise in my chest. Not rage. Not hatred. But power. Because this time, she was on the outside. And I had the key. I walked past Mira and stood just inches from her. I could smell the desperation on her breath. "Where's your smile?" I asked softly. "The one you wore every time you slapped me?" She flinched. "I didn't come here to fight," she said, voice cracking. "I came to say I lost everything. Your son left. My family won't take me back. I don't have a rupee to my name. I crossed my arms. So you remembered the woman you locked in the storeroom when you needed a roof. She looked down, silent. And then she did the one thing I never thought I'd see. She got on her knees. In front of me, in front of everyone, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I was cruel. I know I don't deserve anything, but I had to try, because you're the only person I ever saw stand back up." My chest tightened, because for a brief moment, I saw her not as the monster she had been, but as a scared, broken girl beneath layers of bitterness and inherited cruelty. I turned to Mira. "Give her food," I said. "Let her warm up." "But she doesn't stay here." Mira nodded. I looked back down at my daughter-in-law and said quietly, "You will walk away from this door alive. That's more than you ever gave me." And I left her there, soaked and small. Because my forgiveness didn't need her presence. It needed my peace. And now, I had it. It started with a question. One of the younger volunteers, a college girl named Nisha, had been listening to the women in the shelter for weeks, her notebook always open, her eyes wide with horror and awe. One afternoon, after watching Rekha share her story with a new resident, she approached me quietly. "Auntie," she asked, "would you be willing to speak?" On camera. I nearly laughed. Speak? Me? The same woman who had once begged silently for water behind a locked storeroom door? The one who had pretended for years that bruises were clumsiness and weight loss was old age? But Nisha's eyes didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. "Your voice could change everything," she said. "There are thousands of mothers like you who think they're alone." I sat with it that night. Sat with the fear, the doubt, the old voice in my head whispering, "Who would listen to someone like you?" But that voice was no longer mine. It belonged to the past. So I said yes. They filmed me in the garden behind the shelter. I sat on an old wooden bench with sunlight on my hands and spoke. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I simply told the truth. About the night I was tied to a chair. About being dragged by my hair across the floor like I was a rag. About eating stale roti soaked in saltwater tears. And about the moment I finally stood up, not because I was fearless, but because I had nothing left to lose. The video was posted to a small awareness page. By morning, it had over 100,000 views. And by the end of the week, I was on a poster. "Elder abuse has a face. And it's hers." They printed them in Hindi and English. Hung them on buses, walls, schools, clinics. Some people cried when they saw me. Others looked away. And some women like me came to the shelter with trembling hands and whispered, "I saw your face, and I knew I wasn't alone." I had been hidden for so long, but now I was seen. It was folded neatly, placed inside a plain white envelope. No name on the front, no stamp, just handed to Mira by a boy on a bicycle who rode away before she could ask a single thing. She brought it to me after dinner. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, my hands trembling slightly, not with fear, but with something deeper. Hope. Inside, it began the way I didn't expect. "Ma, if you've opened this, thank you. I wasn't sure if you'd tear it up. You'd have every right to." I sat down slowly. I want to say things I should have said years ago. I want to admit that I was a coward. I saw your pain. I saw the bruises. And I pretended not to. Each sentence felt like it was written with a needle, sharp, but necessary. It was easier to believe her stories than to confront my own weakness. I called myself a husband, a son, a man. But the truth is, I was none of those. I was a frightened little boy in a grown man's body, watching his mother suffer and doing nothing. I pressed the page to my chest. Not because I forgave him yet, but because I finally saw his heart bleeding. "Ma." I left her. Not because of the video, but because when I saw you walk out with your head high, I realized I hadn't seen you truly alive in years. You looked like someone reborn. I turned the page. There it was. The sentence that made my breath catch. "Can I ever be your son again? Not by blood, but by actions, by truth, by the way I should have always been." I couldn't stop the tears then, because they weren't tears of grief. They were the tears of a mother whose child was trying to come home. Not to the house, but to her. He ended with, "If you can't forgive me, I'll understand. But if you ever want to talk, really talk, it'll be at the temple near your shelter every Sunday. I'll sit by the banyan tree. No pressure. No expectations. Just hope." I folded the letter gently, placed it beside my pillow. And that night, I didn't dream of storerooms or shouting or hands around my wrists. I dreamt of a banyan tree and a sun waiting beneath it. All week, the letter lay beside my bed like a quiet visitor. Some nights I stared at it in the dark, rereading lines I already knew by heart. "Can I ever be your son again?" That sentence haunted me more than the bruises ever did, because the bruises faded. But that wound, the wound of being abandoned by your own flesh and blood, it festers in silence. At the shelter, the women noticed I was quieter, slower. I told them I was fine. But Mira knew. She always knew. "Go," she said on Saturday evening as we washed dishes together. "Just go. If not for him, for you. To say what needs to be said." I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I bathed and wore my plainest sari. No jewelry. No makeup. I didn't want to look strong or pitiful. I just wanted to look like myself. I walked slowly to the temple. The streets were quiet. Birds chirped softly. The smell of jasmine floated through the air like memory. And then I saw it. The banyan tree. And beneath it he sat. My son, not on his phone. Not pacing. Just waiting. Like a boy again. His back was straighter than I remembered. His hair was touched with gray. And in his eyes was something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Shame. He stood when he saw me. "Ma," he said. I didn't reply. Just sat down slowly on the stone bench beside him. The silence was heavy, but not suffocating. "I didn't think you'd come," he said after a while. "I almost didn't," I replied. "I carried your silence for years. And when I needed your voice, you gave me your back." He nodded. "No excuses." I was weak. "You let her tie me to a chair," I whispered. "You left me alone when I couldn't even stand to pee. You watched me shrink and said nothing." "I know," he said. "I hated myself for it." "Hating yourself isn't the same as saving someone," I said coldly. He looked down, and I saw a tear fall onto his wrist. "I'm not asking to be forgiven," he said. "I'm just asking to start learning how to be the son you deserved. Even if you never call me that again." That was the moment. The one where every mother inside me shattered and stood tall at the same time. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter. "I read this every night," I said. He looked startled. "I didn't forgive you," I continued. "Not yet." His shoulders sagged. "But I came." He looked up. "That has to mean something." And so we sat. A mother and her broken son. Not healed. Not whole. But beginning. I never thought my name would be printed on a card. But there it was. Mrs. Radha Devi, keynote speaker, National Women's Safety Forum. I held the card like it might crumble in my fingers. For most of my life, I didn't even own a nameplate on a door. My identity was someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's burden. And now, people wanted to hear me. The invitation had come after the shelter's video campaign went viral. Not just viral online, but viral in the hearts of thousands of women who saw my face and wrote to say, "That could have been me." The organizers said they wanted someone who had lived it. Not a doctor. Not a lawyer. A survivor. I told them I wasn't a speaker. They said, "You already are." The hall was huge. Velvet seats. Blinding lights. A microphone that looked like a serpent with a steel tongue. I stood backstage as women in suits and saris took their seats, notebooks ready. My palms sweated. My stomach turned. I almost ran. But then I thought of Rekha, of Mira, of my daughter-in-law sobbing in the rain, of my son waiting under a banyan tree, and of me tied to a chair in the dark, praying to gods I wasn't sure existed. I stepped onto the stage. The lights hit me, and for a second, I froze. But then I did something I hadn't done in decades. I looked up and spoke. My name is Radha Devi. I am 74 years old, and I have been kicked in the ribs, dragged by my hair, locked without food, and silenced by people who said they loved me. Gasps. Pens dropped. Eyes filled with tears. But I'm not here to tell you I'm broken. I'm here to tell you I am still here. And that should terrify the people who tried to erase me. I spoke for 11 minutes. Not about laws or policies, but about chairs used as prisons. About bruises on parts of the body no one sees. About the cruelty that hides behind closed doors and the silence that lets it grow. And finally, I said, if I can rise after 40 years of being stepped on, then so can the women in your lives. But they need you to listen. And believe. And stop asking, why didn't she leave? And start asking, why did they think they could do this to her? When I finished, the silence was thick. Then applause. Standing. Tears. A woman in the second row whispered, "Thank you, Amma." And for the first time, I knew I had changed something. Not just in myself, but in the world. It had been weeks since the speech. Life at the shelter had found a rhythm again. People stopped me on the street now, not with pity, but with admiration. Ma, they called. Dottie, some said. The staff at the nearby clinic even offered me free checkups for the woman who gave us all a voice. But I didn't feel proud. I felt calm. Like the ocean after a long storm. That morning, I was preparing tea for the other women when Mira appeared at the doorway again, just like she had the day my daughter-in-law first came crying. "There's someone here," she said quietly. I turned and froze. It was her. My daughter-in-law. Her body was thinner. Her face drawn, lips dry. But her hands, they weren't empty. She held something wrapped in a pale yellow shawl. It squirmed. A baby. I walked slowly toward her. She didn't speak. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not from rage, but from exhaustion. I stared at the child. A girl. Eyes big and curious, lips pursed like she'd been born knowing life wasn't always fair. "She's yours," my daughter-in-law whispered. I blinked. "What?" "She's your granddaughter," she said. "Born 3 months after your son left." I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't think I could do it. She looked away. I don't deserve to raise her. I was cruel. I was broken. I ruined you. And now, her voice cracked. Now I'm afraid I'll ruin her too. I didn't say anything, because what do you say to the woman who tortured you and now places the softest thing in the world into your hands? She held the child out. I don't have anyone. You were the only one who survived me. Please, she began to cry. Let her have a chance. I looked down at the baby. Her fingers reached up, blindly, gently, and touched the edge of my sari. And something inside me collapsed. Not in pain. In grace. Because here was a child untouched by cruelty. A seed that hadn't been spoiled. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had a chance to raise something in love. Without fear. Without fists. Without shame. I took the baby in my arms. She was warm. Heavy. Real. And when I looked up, I said quietly, "She will never know what you and I have done to each other. She will only know softness. And safety." My daughter-in-law sobbed. I didn't touch her. I didn't hug her. But I nodded. And that was enough. She left without saying goodbye. And I rocked my granddaughter beneath the rising sun. The child cried that night. Not in fear, but the way babies do, hungry, tired, new to the world. I held her against my shoulder, humming old lullabies I had once sung to a son who no longer slept under my roof. Her breath warmed the side of my neck. Her tiny fist clutched the collar of my night blouse. And when she finally drifted off, I watched her chest rise and fall with a rhythm that reminded me of oceans. This was not my second chance. This was hers. And I would protect it with everything that was left in me. The shelter gave us a small private room. Mira brought second-hand toys and a crib someone had donated. The other women peeked in with soft smiles, their own pain flickering in their eyes like old ghosts. "You're brave," one whispered. I shook my head. "No. I'm ready. There's a difference." That week, my son returned. He waited again by the banyan tree. When I came with the baby in my arms, his face crumbled like dry bread. He knelt, kissed her forehead, and whispered her name, Anvi. "Why didn't she tell me?" he asked. "She didn't trust herself," I said. "And maybe she shouldn't have. But she trusted me." He nodded, held her tiny fingers in his palm, and when he looked up, tears streamed down his face. "Do you forgive her?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I've chosen not to destroy her." "That's different. That's power." He bowed his head. "And me?" I sighed. "I don't know if I'll ever call you Beta again, but you're trying. That counts more than you think." He stayed a while, fed the baby. We didn't speak much, but it wasn't silence like before. It was healing. That night, after feeding Anvi, I rocked her in the old wicker chair someone had painted yellow for us. And she smiled in her sleep. That tiny, perfect smile, it unlocked something inside me. A door I didn't know had stayed shut for decades. The girl I had once been, the one who laughed at monsoon rains, who danced to temple drums, who believed in kindness, she came back. Older now, scarred, but alive. And I whispered into the baby's ear, "You saved me too." Before we begin the final chapter, I want to speak to you, the one watching. Maybe you're a grandmother, a mother, a woman no one checks on anymore. Maybe your smiles hide bruises, or worse, regrets. But I need you to hear me. You are not alone. If Radha's story has touched you, if you've ever felt forgotten, trapped, or silenced, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe Whispers and Wills. Because here, we speak the unspeakable. We give voice to the stories this world tries to bury. Now, let me tell you how it ends. 3 months after Anvi's first smile, I returned to that house. Not to move in, not to forgive, but to reclaim what was mine. I stood outside the gate. The lock was rusted. The plants had swallowed the front path in tangled green. The paint peeled from the walls like old scabs. I stepped inside. The air was heavy with silence. No footsteps. No yelling. No pain. Just echoes. I walked past the chair I was once tied to, the bathroom door where I once begged, the kitchen where she shoved chili powder into my mouth. And I didn't cry. Not this time. Because I wasn't here to grieve. I was here to end something. I opened every window. Let the light in. Walked to the back veranda, where the clothesline still hung, and clipped a single white sheet to the rope. Let it flutter in the breeze. Then I walked to the front door, removed the old iron lock, took a deep breath, and left it unlocked. Because this house would never again be a prison. It would be turned into a women's safe space, funded by the same national network that had once called me to speak. It would hold stories, cries, laughter, healing. I renamed it Nayagar, the new home. Not for me, but for the women yet to come. The ones who still think pain is normal, silence is duty, and cruelty is love. They'll walk in through that door one day, and they'll find tea on the stove, soft music, open arms. Because I will be waiting. Me, Radha Devi. A mother. A survivor. A voice no longer trembling. And I will say, you're home now.